Thank you for joining us for today's Cubinar, that is quarantine webinar, which will be led by industry experts on the topic future-proofing your workforce with enhanced L&D practices. So just a note to all of our attendees, we will be conducting a Q&A session towards the end of today's panel discussion. So if you have any questions for our panelists, please feel free to share the same using the chat box on YouTube. On your behalf, I will direct those questions to our speakers. And just a quick introduction about creating values. First of all, about me, I'm the Associate Director with Creating Values. We are an ISO certified management consulting firm. We provide strategic advisory services to organizations across industries. The domains in which we provide our advisory services include people and culture, which is our HR advisory arm. Technology and risk is our IT consulting arm. Business strategy consulting, brand strategy consulting, and executive search consulting. In 7 years of operations, we have completed more than 225 plus projects. We have worked for more than 15 industries, and we are proud to have a repeat order rate as high as 90%. So if you have any queries regarding the consulting services that we provide, please feel free to get in touch with us, and we'll be happy to walk you through our bouquet of services. So a reminder about our upcoming Cubinar, which is scheduled for 18th of September at 4 p.m. The topic is the evolving dynamics of customer experience with value-based selling. We will be joined by industry leaders. We'll be joined by, the CXO suite, who will be talking about how customer experience has evolved and what is the future when it comes to value-based selling, and what is it that companies should be ready for in order to service their customers better. So please make a note of it and register for it and join us on 18th of September at 4 p.m. for this exciting Cubinar about the evolving dynamics of customer experience with value-based selling. With that, we will start today's Cubinar with a quick introduction of our speakers. So today's panel discussion is on the topic future-proofing your workforce with enhanced L&D practices. Talent management and development practices have undergone substantial changes over the past few decades. As opposed to incremental changes, transformational enhancements are necessitated subject to the dynamic business environment and talent demands. We have been joined by HR and L&D leaders for this enterprising discussion. We have with us Mr. Ankush Arora, Senior Vice President and Head HR from Grofers. He is a seasoned HR professional with multifaceted domain expertise and leadership skills. He has more than 2 decades of experience with multiple organizations like Havells, Jubilant Life Sciences, SAP Labs, L&T, to name a few. He is a sought-after speaker at multiple forums and at institutions and universities of repute. Our next speaker is Mr. Sunil Omanwar, Vice President, Learning and OD, Fortis Healthcare Limited. With over 2 decades of experience in learning, talent management, organization, leadership development, and quality across healthcare, telecom, manufacturing, and IT companies. He is skilled in conceptualizing, strategizing, designing, learning solution, and has trained many facilitators. So it is my privilege to interact with these esteemed dignitaries and to moderate today's session. I will be directing some specific questions to our speakers. So now I will request our speakers to turn on their camera and to unmute themselves. So my first question is for Mr. Ankush. Mr. Ankush, one size fits all. This approach can be a major hindrance for the effectiveness of L&D interventions. So how can organizations ensure that relevant trainings are deployed?
So, well, first of all, thank you, Sujata, and your team for hosting this Cubinar. I think this is going to be the new normal for all of us. We can very well say farewell to all the ILTs and the nice 5-star hotel sessions that we used to have. So that's history now. But anyways, I think it's a very pertinent question that you've asked, which is around, one size fits all kind of, the learning approach that most of the organizations had. I mean, like it was a very generic exercise. You do a TNI after an appraisal cycle, and then you formulate a training calendar, and then you roll out those trainings, right? But I think what now is happening, and it's good to see that these things are really happening on the ground, where organizations have understood the importance of customization, or some organizations call it personalization of the training interventions or the learning interventions. Now, when we say customization, it doesn't mean very specific to an individual. It could be the need of an individual, of course. It could be the need of the role that you are looking at the individual for, or the role that the individual aspires to do. It could also be the need of a small group of people. If your business models have changed, if you're entering into a new geography, if you're launching a new product, right? So all these things call for a specific level of customization. And I think the key towards a successful customization is always the involvement of the people, right? This customization or personalization, although it's a very simple thing that you understand their requirements, develop something and give it to them. But when it comes to execution and deployment, that is where the gaps start to coming in. And I think the only way these gaps can be minimized is when you involve people in this process of customization, when you involve people in this process of personalization, rather co-create the content with the people per se. And even if you're hiring an external consultant or an external vendor for this exercise, do not leave it to the external parties, or do not kind of give your content only. I think it should be a collaborative approach. It should be more in terms of a co-creation model, irrespective whether you're doing it in-house or whether you're doing it through external vendors. I think second point would be that how do you reinforce these customized learnings that again play a very vital role in the success of a L&D intervention. It should not be just a that you organize a training or you organize a L&D intervention and then you forget it, right? There has to be a stringent follow-up, and the follow-ups also again have to be customized. See, at the end of the day, if you're doing a workshop or if you're doing a L&D intervention or a OD intervention also for that matter, for a group of people, not everyone will learn or grasp in a similar manner. So your follow-ups have to be customized. Your follow-ups have to be personalized to an individual, to a group again. And lastly, I think there's going to be a lot of focus on technology, right? We always had this blended learning approach where you had the ILT and the LMS part. Now I think technology is going to play a very, very vital role. And with technology, with data, you have ample scope of designing content, designing interventions which are very specific to the needs of the individuals. So I think my take here would be that yes, there is a ask for customization. There's no going back. Like customization will go more and more granular only in future, right? It's not, you can't pull back from customization. It's the need of the hour. See, today nobody is interested in sitting in a virtual workshop for 2 hours without making any sense out of it. If I don't understand the value of that workshop, that how can I gain from it, how do I apply the learnings, it's not going to be of any help to me unless I see that value coming out of it. Second would be the more important part will be more on terms of how do you leverage the technology and the data part. Your data and technology should be in sync. They should tell you that this is the workshop that you're going to do, this is the impact that you're going to see, and these are the people that you're going to impact. So that's where I come from in terms of that how do you personalize or customize this entire workshop.
Well, very nicely put and very clearly summarized also towards the end of your response. So thank you, Mr. Ankush, for that. With that, I'll move to my next speaker. And Mr. Sunil, this question is for you. Building an engaged learning community is another challenge for the L&D teams. What can talent teams do to keep their employees engaged in the learning process?
So thank you, Sujata, and thank you, Ankush, for setting this up very well. Extremely glad to hear the customized approach to learning. I think marketing people use this employee segmentation to the hilt, and it's time that the training teams and HR teams also start using employee segmentation and then the role segmentation. There's tremendous kind of opportunity there. Coming back to the question, to your question on learning engagement and the communities, I think it is challenge, and the way we look at it and the way we execute it, we need to look at two elements here. One of the element is which are the communities that are involved. The learning training community itself. I mean, at Fortis, at our place, we have a huge internal team of 25 people. So one is that part, or as Ankush said, external facilitators, bringing them together as a community together, that they are not working in piecemeal basis, but they are working with something that is a learning agenda for the organization. So how do you bring that together? That's one aspect to it, and I'll share some examples later. The second is the whole aspect of participants and the learners coming together and helping each other. That is very critical. You know, most of the time we joke in programs, most of the learning happens in lunch breaks and tea breaks. Under class mein to chal raha hota hai, but most of the sharing, when they do the sharing among themselves, that's the program also. How do you do that? But after the program, peer learning is something that works fantastically well if we have to do the transfer of learning. The third is very critical, which is the manager support to the participants. You know, most of the learning goes out of the window if the manager support is not available. And so that's an important community. Manager has a problem and learner has something to execute. So that's the third community. And the fourth is the whole aspect of sponsor and the manager. Manager will not invest time if the sponsor at the helm of the affairs, uh, there is nothing something that we are wanting to solve. So these are the four things. In a training, we normally say training session, but I call training as pre-training, post-training, and the training aspect. So in all these three dimensions, all these four segments have to get involved into this. So quickly, some practices. I think it's very important in internal teams to have collective TOTs, getting that together. Just one example of how we go about doing peer learning. So we have something called as learning forums, you know, where after the program, within 30 days, all the participants will come together on a voluntary basis to share their challenges and their success. Now, it's like a open-ended session. So there's a lot of discussion within the organizations whether to do this or not to do this, because there will be venting. And finally, it was decided, if that's at the top of the mind for an employee to vent something, because that's what is stopping him from applying the learning on the job, this is where it is. So learning forums for having the peer learning in terms of doing that. And then laying down for the manager and the peers. In fact, we have kind of graduated the learning forums to a place where we can even invite the managers or the concerned people that we think are blocks for implementation of the learning. But the participants need to decide that, not the learning. So the idea is to set this learning community. I almost have 700, 800 learning communities. Mostly they will work for 3 months. So let's be very practical about it. It's not going to work for 9 months and 10 months. There are two learning forums in the past 3 years which have been working for that period. Most of the learning forums will work for 3 months to 4 months, and then they are on to something else. And that's something that the talent community, learning community needs to keep it in mind, that what is that we are pursuing. Very easily said, but we put it in a framework in terms of getting the sponsors into the training program. And as the previous panelist Ankush said, what problem are we solving, and what is the individual competence that we are solving? It has to be both. So the training people have to look at what is the problem that you're solving for the organization, what is the performance that you're wanting to enhance, and at the same time, what is the competence, broadly speaking, that you are going to involve and have these individuals learn. When both of this match, then the sponsor, manager, the participants, and the trainers are working in a sync. And this requires tremendous amount of time. Just not it's customization, it's contextualization, bringing in the real-time problems, uh, building role plays on real-time problems. So one has to really context. The other aspect of it is how do we acknowledge this whole business of training? uh, do you publish success stories when people apply the learnings? So we have this mechanism of impact stories. Last year, the year we started, we had just 40 impact stories. This year we had 170 impact stories. Are they enough? No, they're not enough. But what do they do is they kind of immediately spur the other people to do it. So it's a impact story has got its own criteria. The manager, the participant, both of them will validate what has been learned, and their HOD will then validate. So those kind of things, when you acknowledge position, sometimes training is अरे आपको आता नहीं है इसलिए आप ट्रेनिंग सेशन में जा रहे हो. So how are you positioning training into the organization is extremely critical, and that's a challenge. Every time one cannot be doing it, but how do you position it? Do people feel pride to go into a program? And does that make sense in terms of what is that it is solving for the organization? I always call, what is that why are we doing this program? While we are the training managers, but we need to become untraining managers. If someone comes to you with a request, this has to be done, please be very clear why this training needs to be done. So sometimes you need to call yourself as untraining managers, uh, actually questioning and going deep and understanding what kind of skill that needs to be built, or what is that we are looking at that kind of build this. Notwithstanding, there are certain patented programs and certain mandatory programs that obviously the organization does because it's kind of embedded into this, but most of the time that's what it is. So I hope we need to look at holistically for building this engaged learning community. And most of the time, training teams need to heavily invest in their own teams. It's not just once, it needs to be on a regular basis that you're investing in your team. Because when you're setting that up, it automatically sets the thing for the entire organization also. So I think I gave a very longish answer to
So it shows your it actually shows your passion in the subject. So that's a very good thing. It goes to validate that we actually bring in a curated list of speakers on the topics that we choose. So thank you so much, Mr. Sunil. In fact, both of our speakers have made some very, very valid and significant points. Like Mr. Ankush said, it's the customization, it is the personalization of the trainings, and that is a key response even to engagement. The moment it is customized, obviously it is, if it and it answers the question about what's in it for me, what is the problem that ultimately it will solve, is when I, as someone who's undergoing the training, undergoing an intervention, would feel energized and engaged with it. And Mr. Ankush also rightly pointed out, it could be your own content, it could be your own intervention, or you might involve partners in it, but it has to be a co-creation methodology that needs to be followed. So these are some very interesting points. So with that, Mr. Ankush, my next question is again to you. In present times, employees are rather demanding and focused on their self-development. How can organizations address this demand effectively?
Okay. So, I mean, like, if you look at how L&D or training per se has evolved over the last 2 decades, like 20 years back, organizations used to consider training as a perk. It was flashed as a perk that, if you are at a senior level, you go for a 3-day workshop in Goa and, you learn something or no, that was never on the card. It was actually a perk. Another, 7-8 years down the line, it kind of became a benefit. It was projected as a benefit that, while we'll give you a salary, role, everything, we'll also train you on new skills and all. Now it has become a more of an investment. It is more of a basic hygiene investment that organizations need to make. And that is precisely the reason. And the reason is, very specifically to the change in generation. Typically, they say that every 8 to 10 years, there is a new generation of workforce which comes in. So the generation that we
that is 3 to 4 years now, Mr.
yeah. So I'm saying that the pundits say that it's around 8 to 10 years. So I think in the future it's going to be less than even 3 years for sure. So the generation that we are dealing today at workplace, right? When they take a decision to come and join an organization, they are not opportunities as jobs per se. They are looking at more from a career point of view, and they obviously look at the organization growth, right? They always look at the role, you know, the compensation, of course, is one factor, the location, and so on and so forth. But I think one of the biggest factors just that has evolved is that today's generation is actually asking that what is going to be my learning curve, right? Like in my past experience, I've met so many people who we have interviewed or interacted with for roles, and this is one common thing that they explore, and this is also a very common reason why people are leaving organizations, that the learning curve has flattened. I don't have anything new to learn that the organization has to offer. So I think now it has become all the more important for organizations to invest in people, invest in their growth, give them a sense of career progression, give them a sense of career development. And that is where your learning and development, how do you create a learning environment? How do you create a learning organization? These kind of philosophies will now come into play. So I won't call it very specifically that employees are demanding per se. I would say that people expect these things to be there now. It's a basic hygiene thing for them. That if I'm joining a new organization, there has to be something new that I learn, that I apply. Now, of course, organizations also will have some vested interest in making these investments. One will be definitely if you have a good career progression, if you have a good learning philosophy in the organization, you tend to retain your high performers, you tend to retain your people, you minimize your employee turnover, you optimize your costs. So all those benefits, of course, the goodness flows in. And how do you want to do it? It should be more in terms of that, how learning can be made fun. See, today people are so engrossed in their own work. They're busy with their own work. You have to kind of make learning stress free. You have to make learning interesting, and it has to be backed by an opportunity where learnings can be applied. See, there's no fun in teaching me a new skill, and if I'm not able to use it for the next 2 years, that's useless. That's not going to help me, right? So I think what we look at, in my experience, what we look at in an organization is that whenever we are creating a learning calendar, or whenever we are thinking about a learning objective, as Sunil mentioned, right, that we ask a couple of questions: that what are we trying to change here? Even if it's a technical thing, say, how is it going to help? I mean, like if I'm doing a training program or a training intervention on negotiation, right? I'm going to ask a question that how is it going to impact my sales, right? If I'm doing a behavioral program, what behavior am I trying to change, right? And do I, as a training in charge, or as a not just, and this is not just restricted to the training team per se, even the line managers, the business functions, do they have the capability and ability to provide those opportunities? See, if you put me through a training of negotiation skills and you're not exposing me to any sales process, that training is useless. If I have to do a MIS job only, I don't need negotiation skills, right? So are you giving me that platform to apply those learnings? Either you are changing my role, or you are giving me some responsibilities which call for the application, and there is a follow up on that, right? And lastly, trainings have to be designed with a lot more practical and realistic approach, right? So my take here would be that the team members or the employees, it's not a demand. It is actually a basic hygiene factor which they are now considering to join an organization, or for that matter, to leave an organization. You have to stimulate the learning curve of an individual if you have to retain him, if you have to optimize his service for your organization. There is no other way around. because these factors will come into play over and above the monetary or the compensation part that we talk about. See, beyond a certain level, compensation ceases to be a motivator for an individual to perform. You have to throw challenges at him. You have to throw complex problems at him. You have to kind of create a scenario where he learns something new. There has to be that element of zing or excitement that you need to create, right? And that is where I think the organizations have to start considering the training and the L&D piece as an investment, not as an overhead or a benefit or a perk. That was history, of course, right? So you're absolutely right. People, the employees today, the workforce today is much more cognizant of their own self-development, which is absolutely right, and which is actually a good thing, right? So earlier it used to be that fundamentally the trainings were always top down. As Sunil was also mentioning that typically the behavior was if the team has 12 members and you pick up the two non-performing team members, and you'll see that they are the regular feature in almost every training, because the manager would say, यार ठीक है इन लोगों को नहीं आता है तो इनको भेज दो, keep them out of the system. Now I think the trend is reversed. Now the expectation is from the bottom. So the training approach, the training methodology is now bottoms up. People are asking for more workshops. People are asking for those critical skills. Organizations have also started identifying those critical skills, the core skills that they need to have, the core competencies that they need to have within an organization. So I think it's a good trend we are seeing. And I think the solution lies in a very fundamental change in philosophy, that start considering L&D as an investment in people, right? It is for the betterment of organization. It is betterment of their culture. It is betterment of the way of working. It is betterment for the organization in terms of long-term retention. That's something that I feel very strongly about.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Ankush. In fact, yes, rightly mentioned that L&D is an investment. It's not an expense. And there are things and benefits, and rather even tangible benefits to be accrued out of a good L&D strategy and the investments that an organization makes in this front. So with that, I will direct my next question to Mr. Sunil. Mr. Sunil, what advice can you share for the professionals on reskilling, upskilling themselves, especially when we are talking about, yes, like we just heard from Mr. Ankush that, yes, now employees are demanding, and that's a good thing, a good factor, because you want to stay relevant in times. So what will be your advice to professionals?
So I kind of stay away from the word advice. It puts a lot of pressure on you to advise someone. But I would go about answering this question in the people when they walk into to you and ask you questions about career growth, about their competencies, about things. And mostly people ask these questions when they are somewhere in between, or not doing well, or blocked. Actually, if you are on a high, I seldom find people, because they're doing so well, looking that much into the whole aspect. Once the benefits of the learnings are over, they do definitely come into this. So I think one of the, answering your question, one of the things one needs to very clearly, and this is how I explain to this, what level are you on? And I'm not talking of position, vice president, senior vice presidents and presidents. I'm saying, are you an individual contributor? Are you a manager? Are you a manager of manager? Are you managing a function? Are you managing a business? Or are you leading the entire organization? Now, it depends where you are and what is that you are aspiring to, because this determines the kind of competencies that you need to build. So, let me give you an example. If you are at the IC level, you might be looking at interpersonal skills that one needs to learn. Okay, so at people skills, that is what you would want to develop. But at the managerial level, you would want to be building something on team skills, very clearly on team skills. At the functional level, at that level, you would be wanting to build relationship buildings, influencing stakeholders, networking, and things like that. And as you move up the ladder, you need to build all this, but also political skills, right? How to manage and how to go about in terms of doing that. So what I'm trying to give you an example is a professional, and from how does one look at what is the kind of skill one needs to build? So this is one way to look at what is that I need to really work on. Now, is it only the people skills? It's the technical skills and it's the conceptual skills. That obviously needs to be built for anyone at that level. So let's say when you are at the junior level, you need to build more of technical skills very clearly. Very clearly, you would need to build more of technical skills. For people skills, definitely yes, and less of conceptual skills. So one needs to really look at what is that one needs to invest at. But if you're at the middle level, you may have to start building your conceptual skills. What are conceptual skills? Conceptual skills are something where you are able to visualize your function, your team into the future. Uh, you are able to anticipate what is happening in the environment, in the organization, and you are able to see how is that I need to build my function and keep my function ready in terms of going about, or how do I need to respond in terms of to the environment. So these are the things that we need to look at. And when it is a senior level, then definitely you need to look at things of conceptual skills more than technical skills. This is how I would advise anyone to look at their own careers in terms of doing that, and how they are looking at the whole thing. And then the whole aspect of life stage. Which life stage are you in? And that also determines what kind of skills you need to do it. One common things that remain is the advancement in the technology, and that remains for everyone, whether Gen X, Gen Y, and millennials and things like that. I think they score well, but technology is something that everyone needs to be updated, even if your role does not demand you to be on the technology front. But it's very important to, because the technology is changing our socio system just like that, and we don't even imagine the technology has come in and our socio ecosystem has already changed. So this is one skill that one has to be really abreast with, the kind of thing. And as I said, at life stage, one needs to look at personal mastery, relationship building, possibly more in the middle life stage. And then when you are at this stage, at the senior stage, or at age groups where you are in, uh, possibly look at aspects of spiritual growth as well. The corporates definitely require that, and people at the helm, we seldom, and I'll relate it to the last one, seldom we hear this, that there is too much of control and sitting on the whole thing. And while we are looking at empowerment, this is an oft heard things, we require more of empowerment, and we try to convert that into a skill. For me, after looking at all this, I think there is an element of spiritual growth that is required there, in terms of doing that, where we talk about letting it go, and really letting it go, and ensuring that people are nurtured. It's some dimension of spiritual growth. Now, I wouldn't say a young person to look at spiritual growth immediately. They will have to be mindful of that. But I think he needs to look at personal mastery, how to do the job well, how to excel at the job, because there is so much to be conquered for that person. He needs to earn money, be successful in that outward. In middle management, in middle stage of life, one needs to really look at relationship building. It's not only just your family, your network,
Mr. Sunil, your screen is freezing. Mr. Ankush, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Sujata.
Okay, so I think we've, Mr. Sunil, can you hear me? I think we've lost connection with Mr. Sunil. We'll get back to him in a couple of minutes.
your
Yeah, I think it's
Yes,
back.
Mr. Sunil, yeah, we had lost connectivity, I think, in between. If you're facing bandwidth issues, yeah, you can just turn off your camera. Maybe we can just hear your voice, and obviously those learnings are still important.
yeah. Okay, did you lose me, or what?
Yeah, I think I think the last sentence or something we might have, we might have lost your connectivity at that point of time. So in case you face connectivity issue and bandwidth issue in the coming question, you could just turn off your camera so that we can answer the views that you want to share.
Sure.
So thank you, Mr. Sunil. In fact, that is an important learning for all the professionals who've joined us, that core competencies have a very strong relationship in understanding which are the skills that you need to develop, and also contemplating, introspecting that what is the stage of your career, your life cycle. Accordingly, you should try to upskill and reskill yourself. If I've gotten the essence out of Mr. Sunil's response correctly. So with that, I will move to my next question. And the next question is common to both panelists. So first, we could ask Mr. Ankush to share his views on this. Mr. Ankush, what will be your key advice to organizations in terms of adopting an agile L&D strategy?
Okay. I think today everybody is talking of agile. Everything is agile actually. Agile HR, agile L&D, agile software. I think a key for agile L&D specifically would be resting on three major aspects. One is the speed, other would be flexibility, and third would be, you can say, collaboration, or as I earlier mentioned, the co-creation piece. How do you involve people? Speed specifically, because if you look at a traditional methodology involved in designing a course content, it used to be you do a TNI, then you get together some experts, put a structure to the learning course, and then you design, involve the content creators, design activities, design learning objectives. And by the time, I think good 2-3 months have passed. So the per se requirement has lost its relevance, because today, if you look at, if your learning has to be coupled with the business objectives or the business problems that you're trying to solve, I think learning has to be operating at the speed of business, right? You cannot be operating in a lag mode, right? So it's always better if you can anticipate the future needs. That's probably the next level. But I think for starters, bare minimum should be that the learning initiative should be at par with the speed of business. And I think that is where how quickly real-time data, the power of data will be very handy here. How quickly you can leverage on real-time data, how quickly you can leverage technology, what are your processes, right? Second would be flexibility, because I think one of the key aspects of agile is that you don't have to wait for the entire product to finish and then roll it out, right? You can actually release multiple versions of it, like you release a beta version or a trial version or experimental version or version 1.0 or whatever you want to call it. But it should be flexible enough to incorporate the feedback which comes from the participants. It should be flexible enough to incorporate any changes which the business might suggest, right? And the third aspect would be collaboration. Collaboration, not just from a involvement of people, but also from the aspect that this will make your training much more experiential. If people's experiences are incorporated at the time of designing a content or designing a learning initiative, it always helps the participants to relate. I mean, like if I'm doing a training, if I'm doing a sales training for, let's say, a FMCG product company, there's no point in giving an example of a hardware sales or a computer or a printer sales, those legacy examples. People will not be able to relate. So it will be better if you give them examples. The best would be to give them examples from their own organization. So as Sunil was also mentioning, how can we create role models out of these training workshops? How can we create role models out of these L&D interventions, right? And when I say role model, it has to be that somebody who did something, applied those learnings and demonstrated and got the results. Or somebody applied the learnings and there was a significant shift in the behavior for good, right? And it's not just about creating success stories. You can also pull out problems. I've seen a lot of good organizations, they give you real-time problems. See, there's no fun in asking somebody to solve some old university 1940s case study, which may be relevant with absolutely no disregard to that case study. But at the end of the day, why would you solve a case study for a tractor organization which has got no relevance to me? I would actually be interested if the group solves a real life problem for me or a real time problem, which my business is currently facing, right? So use learning interventions as a platform to solve business problems, right? That is one other aspect of agility. So for me, three clear aspects: one, speed; second, flexibility; third is collaboration. And all this has to be coupled together with technology. If you have to think of agile L&D, you cannot do away with technology. Technology in terms of processes, in terms of leveraging data, how can you react? So training has to be, or learning has to be now proactive rather than reactive. So those are my thoughts around agile.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Ankush. Yes, in fact, data and technology both do form major pillars for any agile strategy that an organization wishes to build. Thank you, Mr. Ankush. Mr. Sunil, the same question to you. Your advice to organizations now for agile L&D strategy.
So I'll just add on to what Ankush and not repeat. I think Ankush made very pertinent and valid points. Three things. One is, how do we take, you see, training organizations within the organization tend to bring, tend to limit themselves into some kind of their own package. Okay, some kind of their own package. And I'm not saying whatever package, classroom, digital, or whatever it is. I think for training organizations to become agile, they need to move on the floor and really look at experiences on the floor and how can they help people on the floor in terms of doing that. Second point is, how do you bring the floor into the room? And I think that Ankush definitely changed. So that's another. How do you bring real-time problems and real-time things of what's happening there into the room? And that's what will make it agile, because that's what people are wanting to solve. They're wanting to solve in the current environment, whatever their issues are. That's where the learning function works and does that. The, 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 the third aspect that I will add is, I think the training organizations, the training teams within the organization needs to definitely hone their design thinking skills. And design thinking starts with empathizing with the client. Okay, we often hear training people say, "Oh, the manager is not interested. They are not releasing people. They are not doing this. They are not doing this." And I think there is a need to go back to the design table and really empathize with what is that exactly the client wants. And if you think the client wants something that you can't deliver, it's better not to cater to it and to cater to what you wish to cater to. And that's what will make it agile. Otherwise, you are stuck. The organization is stuck. Everyone is stuck. So one needs to really look at those aspects in terms of doing that. The other thing that I find over the years of experience is, what is the agenda of learning? Is that a board agenda or not? And it's not just an HR agenda. Is learning a board agenda, and is that being discussed at the board level? That automatically opens up things on how learning is improving the behavioral outcomes, how learning is helping the business outcomes, and what is in there. Those are, I think, 4 or 5 things that I'll add on to what, possibly not all of them would be add on, but just build on what Ankush said. If we have to make agile L&D organization to be agile, and within the organization learning to be agile.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Sunil. In fact, quite an interesting take that yes, design thinking concept should be applied even when it comes to the L&D strategy. Always try to be empathetic towards your clients and customers. So whenever I say customers, obviously it means it could be both fronts. It's your external customers and your internal customers. And for L&D team, the employees are the customers. They are your internal customers.
That's right.
And management sponsorship, management discussion and involvement for the L&D strategy is what can make it agile. So thank you to both the speakers for sharing your views on this question. I'll quickly move to my next question, and that's again common to both of our speakers. So Mr. Ankush, firstly to you, in current decade, firms are focusing on mapping core competencies and building a L&D strategy with assistance of assessment and development centers. Is this the way forward for a structured learning path?
So I think I'll answer this question in two parts. First is that why organizations are focusing on competencies or the core competencies as they call it. See, every organization today has so much of diversity in terms of the kind of people that they have, and not just restricted to the gender aspects, but in terms of thought process, in terms of way of working, in terms of approach to life or approach to work. There is enormous amount of diversity, and this is going to increase multifold in the next maybe 3 to 4 years. So we'll see an exponential increase there. So what organizations have realized is that while diversity and inclusion is all the more beneficial, but it always will be much more effective if you have a certain set of parameters, they call it competencies, which actually reflect a similar line of thinking or decision making within the organization. Like if I identify that, business acumen is one of my core competencies, then I would expect that everyone who comes and joins my organization needs to understand business, what we do. It is not being a subject matter expert, in studying the overall, picture of the organization. You may be a subject matter expert in your own domain, but it is extremely helpful that if you are taking any decision, you take decisions keeping in mind the organization at large in the picture, right? So it's a very interesting trend that organizations have now started picking up certain core competencies, which they expect everyone across the organization to demonstrate. Right? It could be a result orientation. It could be focused on execution. It could be on strategy. It could be on understanding the overall business. It could be on people, for example, managing people. Right? It is not just limited to human resources or L&D or some other teams. Every business manager, anyone in the system who's a people manager, needs to have this competency of managing people. Right? So that's part one, where organizations have now started bucketing these core competencies, that irrespective of your domain, irrespective of your level, irrespective of your location, wherever you are based, eh, and work specifically for multinational corporation, you need to have those core set of competencies which are standard across the organization. That's one. Competencies, next level is skills. Now organizations have also started bucketing core skills, and this is a lot more effective in today's scenario where there's a lot of uncertainties and all. So organizations have started categorizing the core skills, that these are the core skills that we will retain within the organization, right? Irrespective of whatever we do in the next 5 to 10 years, these core skills have to be there, right? And these are not, mind you, technical or functional skills. These are typically your behavioral traits or skills, as we call it. Second part of your question was more in terms of that assessment centers and development centers. Now, those are just tools, or those are just means to evaluate or reinforce competencies and skills, right? So while they have their own advantages, but looking at today's generation, looking at the paucity of time that we have today in our workplace, right? You will have to evolve the way assessment centers or those development centers are being done. I mean, like, there's no fun in taking the entire team out for 2 days and then hold them in a room and there are external or internal assessors. You do a lot of activities which may interest a few, may not be of that interest to others. I think you can look at more practical and more opportunity or application oriented approach towards an individual's development. It could be more in terms of giving them real life problems. It could be more in terms of creating those cross functional groups at workplace which help you solve real problems, the problems that you're actually facing as an organization or as a business, right? So while assessment centers, development centers have been pretty effective in the past, and I think they will also evolve. They are not going to remain static. As the L&D interventions evolve, they will also evolve. But I think the focus will be more on the real time issues at hand, and that is what is going to excite people, right? The other aspect which is very interesting, and this is very recent, I would say, is that people are now asking questions that apart from business problems, what problems organizations are solving for the community at large. So as an organization, what am I doing in in my capacity as a as a manager in the organization? How is it impacting the community at large, right? And it is not CSR. We are not talking of corporate social responsibility. It is the impact of an organization's services or goods or whatever they are, the core business they are in, how the community at large is getting impacted. What results is it showing, or what benefits it is passing on to the larger population, right? So that again gives you an insight that your L&D strategy or your assessment centers or your core competencies should be looked at from a community point of view, right? You don't want a very different viewpoints coming around from the same organization, that or one person or one group of people is saying something different and the other person's approach is very different, right? So when you are looking at presenting external face, I think there has to be standardization enough for sharing your thoughts, sharing your ideas, and the basis for that is your core competencies and skills.
Interesting. Thank you, Mr. Ankush. So, Mr. Sunil, the same question to you. Your take when it comes to core competencies, the focus on it, using assessment and development centers, and how will that evolve over time with L&D strategy?
So I think I'll just shift to the second one, which is uh, where would assessment and strategy of assessments be potent and be valid in terms of doing that. Uh, I think on the competency front, we need to also look at how mature the organization is. Uh, Competency means that certain set of characteristics that lead to superior performance. And if the organizations are evolving fast, sometimes those behaviors, competencies are changing also in terms of responding. So there is an element of the view that we have for that to happen. But in a mature organization, definitely you can talk about uh, things. The other aspect that is applicable is when we call it universal competencies, which are leadership competencies. So across organizations, I have experienced that some of those core competencies remain same as far as people competencies are concerned. But the other core competency Ankush has already said will be very dependent to the industry and to the organization and things like that. Does assessments and talent assessment a strategy? I think one needs to look at the organization and look at what is the amount of subjectivity and what is the amount of objectivity that it wishes to have. The decision points, the talent decisions point cannot be based on just objective, just subjective, and so the organization would calibrate all those aspects. Because talent assessments and things like that, when you do, provide certain amount of objectivity, which becomes an input into various decision making, and that's what one needs to keep in mind. Uh, the other aspect of it is good when we are talking of from a self-development point of view, because it gives you a good picture of where you are with respect to the universal competencies or people competencies, whatever you may call in terms of doing that. So that's where I would leave it at that. It's the element of subjectivity and objectivity that one needs to strike the balance for taking talent decisions, and the maturity of the organization to look at whether it wants to go in for competencies or whether it wants to follow a model of critical attributes, and continue to evolve as it continues to evolve. With so much of agility and so many things, sometimes it's not a good idea. One has to be very really selective and not get stuck to the whole business of competencies. And I have sometimes find that we get very stuck to competencies, while the real time what we are seeing on the floor is something different. And so HR and L&D needs to be very cautious about this whole business about what competencies to pursue uh, with regards to, because you're hard coding when it goes into talent and assessment center. So that's where I will leave the debate. It's a debate. It's not a it's not one way or the other way.
Okay, great. So, like we've been discussing that the phase of L&D is changing. So accordingly, even when it comes to core competencies when it comes to assessment and development centers. Even they are evolving and have to evolve with time. And very truly mentioned that the case studies should be industry specific, should be something that can help answer real time problems for the participants who are going through certain such interventions. So that is how assessment and development centers can be designed to answer the real problems. So with that, we are closer to a wrap for today's panel discussion of the focused questions. However, we will be soon moving to the question and answer session. We have pre-received a few questions from our participants who had registered for the panel of today. So prior to that, a reminder to all of our attendees that please join us on 18th of September for our next webinar, which is the evolving dynamics of customer experience with value-based selling. We will be joined by C-suite of varied industries who will be talking about what is it that they are currently pursuing within their organizations and how do they see customer experience evolving even over the next few years. So please make a note of it and join us on 18th of September at 4 p.m. So the Q&A for today, like I mentioned, we had pre-received a couple of questions from our registered attendees. So I'll just direct those one by one. So the first question is for Mr. Sunil. Mr. Sunil, budgets are tough in current times. How can this situation be handled by the L&D teams and leaders within their respective organizations?
So it's an opportunity. If it is tough, then it's an opportunity. Most of the time, practical experience in the 4-5 months, really tough. There's no doubt about it. And I think it has thrown the organizations into tough performance cost challenges as well. It's really challenging. And I think today only we were talking in our team and someone said, we need to be more empathetic. And where do you derive that empathy sometimes becomes a challenge for the L&D organizations. 2-3 things that it needs to very clearly look at it is to be alert to any explicitly said needs during this time. I think that's very clear, and I wouldn't call implicit. During these times, it is important that it is explicit. Otherwise, training might be perceived as you are trying to carry your agenda into something else. So it has to be explicitly stated. The second is very clear is how does learning and development provide self-care programs in this time to all the people. And that's something that everyone requires. And I'm calling it self-care. You can call it stress, you can call it hope, resilience, and uncertain times and things like that. That is the second aspect that definitely needs to be. The third is to take care of your new employees. At this point of time, there is so much of challenge, and we work in a hospital industry. There's so much of challenges that or in any other industry, a new employee comes. It's very important to ensure that not left in the melee of things, because there is so much of action that is happening. And the fourth that I would add is learn technology yourselves. It's not multinationals, and I'm just categorizing. Would many of the organizations, let me not categorize it, many of the organizations themselves are slow off the board as far as technology is concerned. And so very important for learning and development people to actually understand the technology, the digital part of it, and how to digitalize whatever they are wanting to do. That's very clear. Are you able to immediately look at whatever you are offering in classroom, and if that was the need at this point of time, how do you quickly digitalize it? The fifth that I would add is the attention span goes down when challenges come up. If there is problems in our lives, our attention span immediately get reduced because most of our energy goes in terms of addressing that. And so it's very important to be able to provide I would call it micro learnings, that this is the only thing that is required, and so quickly can you provide only that much and not talk about this much. as an organization. Those are 5 things that definitely, as an L&D organization, we need to be alert on. And I use the word alert on because that kind of removes the pressure from the performance. When there is so much that is happening around, one needs to really, and I'm focusing on the self-care part of it, one really needs to look at how you are moving and navigating through this process.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Sunil, for sharing such insights with us. So, Mr. Ankush, the next question has been directed to you. Apart from digital mode of learning, what are some of the major changes you can foresee for L&D over the next 3 to 4 years?
Uh, See, digital or any other mode of training is more in terms of the pedagogy, in terms of that what means are you going to use the training. What I foresee as a change in the L&D philosophy will be more in terms of the relevance of content. Sunil also, mentioned a couple of times. I think that is going to be the key differentiator. How do you engage people in creation of content? How do you leverage the experience levels of people within the organization? Right? What content do you offer? Whether you offer it digitally or whether you hand it over on a piece of paper or call them for a workshop or do it over a Zoom, that will continue to evolve. Today we are talking of a virtual training session. There will be a evolvement of LMSs coming on the way, right? Where you will do some bookmarking. You already have those kind of features built in some of the leading LMSs. But I think the key changes will arise from the content part of it. What content are you sharing it? How is it relevant to people? Are people feeling connected to the content? Are people able to apply those learnings on the job, right? These are the things that is going to shape or reshape the L&D philosophy of the organization. Digital is one means. I mean, like we had ILTs, then we moved to blended learning, then some other approach came in. Now we are talking of digital and virtual, right? So these things will continue to evolve, right? It's basically leveraging technology. The crucial thing is where human intervention will be required is basically evolving a thought process around the relevance of content. That is going to change drastically over the next 3 to 4 years. We were earlier talking of a role. Today we are talking of a function and organization. We've started those initial seeds of community impact, right? So this is where how your L&D philosophy will grow.
Okay, great. So it will ultimately be the relevance of the content that is used, and it's not just about the mode of learning.
Yeah.
So that is a major shift that is happening currently. We are in the process of it, and I think yes, it's right. Over the next 3 to 4 years, it might come in big time. So with that, these were a couple of questions that we had received from our registered attendees, and quite relevant questions. So I hope my professional network, extended professional network that must have joined us on YouTube has made certain notes of the insights and observations, the learnings that have been shared by our speakers. So thank you so much to all the attendees who have joined us for this webinar on YouTube. Please do join us next week also. And if you have queries about any of our upcoming events or about our past webinars, feel free to get in touch with us and we could share the recorded version of those webinars with you so that you can share the same within your peer network and learnings can just continue. Thank you to our attendees. And now I take this opportunity to thank our speakers who have joined us, mainly because you have given us your valuable time in these stressful times. Thank you so much, Mr. Sunil and Mr. Ankush, for your valuable time and for the observations, the case studies that you have shared with us. I'm sure people must have taken a note of it. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Siddharth.
Thank you for having this. Pleasure. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
So, bye bye. So, with that, this is Creating Values Webinar Friday, signing off. Thank you.